Hey, welcome once again to Epilogue, where we are continuing our discussion on communion today. Last week, you heard from Russell and me. It was part one. And this week, we're going to dive a little deeper in part two and also answer some great questions that have come in about communion. And we want this to be a reminder to you to please feel free, as we always say, feel free to send in any questions you may have on the topic we're discussing. We would love to engage with you in that way. So enjoy the podcast. Oh, yeah. I love that you emphasize that. And I think that's really at the core of this. And so I appreciated the way, and even just in our conversation, it feels like maybe peeling back some of those layers that we've added on top of grace.
Yeah.
Just things that we say, man, I got to do something.
Yeah.
I got to, man, I need to do something to feel close to Jesus. I need to do something to receive that grace. And
Yeah.
So
We have to. I think this is the hard part about anything, and so I believe communion and baptism highlight the inconsistencies sometimes we have in our own doctrine, especially of justification. But where we may not feel we struggle, we still have to be careful. So to make that clear, we believe when you put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ, you are declared righteous before God.
yes,
You are adopted, you are sealed, you are given all the benefits of Jesus Christ in that moment.
Yeah.
Something forensic takes place. So that means baptism doesn't add to that or take away from that. Marriage doesn't add to that or take away from that, and communion doesn't, right?
Right.
And I can list a whole host of things where sometimes if we don't struggle in those areas, we might say something like church attendance or generosity or good works and service, and so now all of a sudden we've added something else to it. While we may not add communion and baptism,
Right.
we come up with our own list of things. And so I think this is a great reminder to think, I mean, nothing adds. The work was accomplished. Jesus Christ died once for all. So there's no need to re-crucify him through 100 different ways, right? We embrace his grace, and we're going to add nothing to it.
That's right. Jesus plus nothing.
Yeah. And it sounds good until that flesh in us is like, man, we got to add something.
I got to do something. Yeah, I got to do something.
And for me personally, it's not communion or Lord's Supper, but man, it may be the Russell of something else. And so we just always have to kind of keep that in mind.
I think that's a great reminder. I mean, we get in, you just fill in that blank for you. You know, what is that thing that you go to earn God's favor, to earn God's grace? And it's just a reminder. We don't earn it.
Yeah.
We don't earn anything. Yeah. That's why it's grace.
Yeah.
So
I guess something else that came as I was thinking through John chapter 6 in terms of to the degree that we view the presence of Christ in the elements. And for us, we would say that there's nothing special. There's no elements there. But if you nothing in the elements, if you do think there are, then that has a direct impact on how you facilitate or execute the Lord's Supper.
Absolutely.
And so because in the Catholic Church, the bread and the wine turn into the actual body and blood of Jesus Christ in their mind, then that needs to be facilitated by a priest.
Yep.
And it needs to be offered in a certain way. And when you take a step down from that, even in the Lutheran tradition, it still needs to be overseen by a priest and in a very high church liturgical way. My friends who are Presbyterian, the next step down, if you will, like a couple removed from transubstantiation, they would still say, man, this needs to be done in a protected manner under the authority of the Word of God, of an elder or a pastor, This doesn't need to be kind of willy-nilly in people's houses. This needs to be under the authority of the word.
Mhm.
And so they would, that sola scriptura, that, man, that's
Yeah.
got to be there. And so you've got that mindset. And then for those of us who are like, man, there's nothing there, then breaking some bread and drinking some juice in your home
Yeah. Yeah.
is fine, because there's nothing
Yeah.
special that I've got to pray into existence here, or something I need to
That's right.
protect other
Yeah.
people from.
That's why
So,
Sunday, I appreciate you, encouraging people to try practicing this at home or in their small group.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and you said at the end, you don't need you or any other elder to come over and bless the bread and the cup.
Or
And
you playing in the background,
which, yeah, I don't mind, but
be a little awkward, but
yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, I appreciate that, because I think sometimes, and you mentioned trying to understand where some of these traditions are coming from and why they practice this. And I can understand some of these traditions going, hey, yeah, well, 1 Corinthians 11, the tension there is, even around 1 Corinthians 11 is there's some abuses of some of these gatherings, or the way they're practicing the Lord's Supper. And we'll talk about a little later what it means to take the bread and the cup in an unworthy manner. And so they were doing this. It was a little chaotic. And so people go, oh, well, we got to protect the church from that, or people from misusing it or abusing it. And so you can understand how people go, oh, it needs to be in this controlled environment.
Sure.
But I'm not sure that's the spirit of what Paul was saying there. But
Yeah.
it's, anyway.
It's probably good to also think how the early church practiced this.
Mhm.
And it was a great reminder that the early church didn't have buildings in Acts
right.
2, 3, 4.
House to house.
It's
Yeah.
house to house
Mhm.
because it had to be.
Yep.
There was persecution. There was no public setting. If there was, it was in a synagogue, which had Israel, the Jews had this kind of give and take relationship with Rome, but
Right.
Christians did not.
Yeah.
And as Christianity began to grow, there are some fascinating quotes about how they were viewed as cannibals
Mm.
because of the Lord's Supper.
Yeah.
And people were threatened by them, and so all of this misunderstanding was crazy, but they had to meet in homes. And we get a feel from Acts chapter 20 that they did this the first day of the week. They shared a meal.
Mhm.
Jude calls it a love feast or an agape feast. Paul calls it the Lord's table, the Lord's supper in 1 Corinthians 10 and 11. Jesus obviously did this around Passover,
Mhm.
a meal that would be taken to commemorate the Passover in Exodus. So this wasn't, hey, we're all going to stand together and get this cute little cup, and here's
Right.
a little wafer.
Yeah.
And because of, again, going back to Constantine and Christianity being made the dominant religion, then we
Mhm.
could build buildings. And when you bring everybody in, it becomes hard to share a meal together.
Mm.
And so now we've, through the years, kind of just made it an institution and a rite, and it's got all these symbols
Yeah.
and pretty ornate trays.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, man, I don't think that's how it went down to begin with.
Right.
And so anyway, kind of interesting to think about it
Yeah.
as it's morphed throughout history to this, more ritualistic than it.
Formal, high churchy
Yeah.
feel to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny you're talking about that. Like we've talked about this before, but I grew up in a Bible church. My dad's a pastor, and I grew up celebrating the Lord's Supper we called it the Lord's Supper in
Yeah.
a very specific way. And so we would gather on Sunday nights, and it was a potluck, and everybody would bring food, and we'd all gather around a table, and we'd worship. There was teaching, and it wasn't a sermon. It was like a discussion about
Yeah.
a Bible text, and we'd take the bread, we'd worship some more, we'd take the cup, and it wasn't nothing high church about it. It was just, these were family gatherings. I remember as a kid falling asleep at them,
Yeah.
and then when I got older, a little older in college, being able to participate in the
Yeah.
discussions, and so it was pretty foreign to me growing up like that. And and the church I grew up in, they still practice Lord's Supper that way, and
It's
I
beautiful.
love
Yeah.
it, and it was so foreign to me to come uh, out of that into college, into a church that where it was on Sunday morning, and it was this real. It was a you take the plate and it's real private and
Yeah.
individual,
Yeah.
and and so I remember that change and feeling like almost this high churchiness of a
Yeah.
formalness to it, and I was like, man, this feels foreign to me, and so it's just interesting to look back and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but
No,
looking
yeah.
back at the way the early church practiced it and the way we practice it today, it's just
Yeah.
it's interesting what it's become over the years.
No doubt.
So,
And church size definitely plays a factor in it.
absolutely.
I do think it would be great for us. This is one of those times where it'd be great for us to be really open-handed
Mhm.
as we think about how this happens.
Yeah.
And it can happen in a home. It can happen in a small group. It can happen in a mission trip.
Mhm.
I just think of all the times where it's kind of like this, can we do this at youth camp? Could we do it a- and the answer was yes,
Mhm.
but man, for some reason we still wanted to make that bread and juice something special.
Yeah.
And deep down we know it's not.
Yeah.
It is to remember the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And so
Absolutely.
I think it would be good for us to come open-handed to it, which brings up a few things in terms of it. Can you pass it out? Can
Mhm.
you do it every Sunday? Can you just do it once a quarter?
Yeah.
Can it be at a meal? Can it be? What about the rip and sips that we
Rip and
did
sip,
at COVID? I mean,
Yeah.
do we pull off a piece of bread and dip it in the juice? Do we
Yeah.
share a cup? All of the different ways that it happens.
Who serves it? What
Who's-
do they say when they serve it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's who leads in that? Is it,
Yeah.
does it have to be an elder pastor? I mean, it brings up all these questions.
Tons of questions.
And even brings up the question of, is it bread and grape juice or bread and wine,
Yeah.
because man, Jesus served wine. And so
Yeah.
is grape juice something lesser, or what do you do with that? So
I had a guy a couple of weeks ago in the foyer ask me, he goes, "You referenced the bread and juice. Is that because is that because alcohol's not a good thing?" And
yeah.
it was a great conversation. I bring that up to say, that this is what I call house rules.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll define that. For me and our family, let's say we go to bed at 9 o'clock,
Mhm.
and you go to somebody else's house, but they don't go to bed till 10:30.
It's like the Bryants.
Yeah, you guys are up all night. And we go to bed early.
Yeah.
I'd look at my kids and say, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
That's a house rule.
Mhm.
This is what we do. They buy 2% milk. We buy whole percent milk.
That's right.
I really want to judge you about that, but I'm not going to.
Yeah.
It's just a house rule.
Yeah.
And we can be different, and it's fine. If somebody doesn't want to eat meat and we want to eat meat, those are just house rules.
Yeah. We
They're-
can relate on the whole milk, by the way. Just
Good.
yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I figured you could,
Yeah.
And then there are God's rules.
That's
And-
right.
And God's rules are, we don't lie.
Mhm.
We don't cheat. We don't steal. These are things
That's
that
right.
God says to do.
Yeah.
The only command we have with the Lord's Supper is to do it in remembrance
Mhm.
of Him.
Yeah.
And so if a church wants to offer it every week, they have the house rules and the freedom to do that.
Hmm.
If a church wants to serve a whole loaf and you come up and pull a piece off, we have the freedom to do that.
Yeah.
If we want to serve that as a meal together, if we want to use wine, if we want to use grape juice, if Dr. Pepper's all we got in the fridge,
Yeah.
like I would just say all of these are house rules.
Yeah.
And there's a freedom with which we do it, and it's just amazing to watch house rules become God's rules
God's rules.
sometimes.
Yep.
And that can happen in baptism. It can happen with communion. It can happen with the songs we sing,
Yeah.
what we wear, what kind of preaching we do, Sunday
Yeah.
school. Like the list goes on, right?
Yeah.
And we can make a non-moral issue a moral issue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So all that. My guess is for us, most churches are probably going to serve juice just to be cognizant of people's moral decision to abstain from
Sure.
alcohol in different ways.
Different
But-
conscience levels of conscience there.
Sure,
Yeah.
you
but-
bet.
Yeah.
Most of us aren't probably going to share a common cup, even though it kind of looks like that's what Jesus did in
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But we wouldn't say that's a descriptive passage, not prescriptive, so we don't have to share a common cup. But
As a
anyway,
germaphobe, I'm not going there. Yeah, but it,
that's great.
you know me well enough to know that though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that, the house rules versus God's
Yeah.
rules, and I think that's really important. Is Augustine right that said in Essentials
Mm,
unity and non-essentials charity.
yeah.
Irony is when it came to sacraments, I think he had like 30 sacraments, not just the
Yeah.
whatever.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's a good principle to
Sure.
practice, and yeah. Well, hey, we had some questions come in. I
Fire
know,
away. Yeah.
one of the questions was we touched on it earlier, but in 1 Corinthians 11, it's verse really 27 and 28. It says right after. I mean, we often read from 1 Corinthians 11, starting at verse 23. For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, in the night in which he was betrayed, and then we go through the Lord's Supper, sayings of Jesus, and then it goes into verse 27, right after that, and Paul says, therefore, whoever eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner
Mm,
shall be guilty of the body and the blood of the Lord.
yeah.
And so again, a lot of us, our minds go right back to John 6 and like the actual body and blood
That's
of the
right.
Lord. I'm
Yeah.
guilty of that. And whoever eats the bread in an unworthy manner, oh, what does that mean? And
Yeah.
so a lot of us define that in different ways. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit. I think that
Sure.
just be helpful for folks out there. Obviously that question came in. So
Yeah, I got a similar question to that on
Mhm.
Sunday morning after
Mhm.
the service. So, um, when you read 1 Corinthians 8, 9, 10, and 11, there are multiple conversations about the meals they are
Mhm.
having together and
Mhm.
how they are having those meals. And one of the problems is that as they come to the Lord's Supper, which is what Paul calls it in 1 Corinthians 10, there is there's an abuse in terms
Mhm.
of certain people are eating at certain times, other people are eating at other times, and not only that, some people they're not seeing this as a chance to get together and share fellowship.
Right.
They're just pigging out and eating everything.
Yeah.
Some people are drinking so much wine they're getting drunk. So clearly they were viewing this in a manner that wasn't what Paul was
Mhm.
envisioning. To take that a step further, there's some great thoughts on what a home would have looked like in Rome
Yeah.
and where they would have actually eaten.
Mhm.
And I think about my home. There's a formal dining room, and that's
Yeah.
probably where the first people to show up are going to sit.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I send the kids to a little breakfast nook.
Yep.
And what was happening is they weren't sending the kids to the breakfast nook. They were probably sending maybe the slaves,
Poorer people.
the servants, and so there was a socioeconomic um, divide. And Paul is looking at this and saying, let me get this straight. You have Jesus who has sacrificed his life, his body and his blood for all of us. And
Yeah.
now you guys are coming together, trying to celebrate this and separating people
Yeah.
based on what they have and don't have.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what it means in an unworthy manner.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the context. And so does confessing sin, is that a good principle? Sure. Is being in right relationship with people a good
Mm.
principle? Absolutely. Matthew 15, like you can get there. In this context, it is the unworthy manner is
Mm.
separating people out. So like I can't even imagine on a Sunday morning if we
Mm.
looked at people and said, "Hey, everybody who's in this tax bracket, you're going to go over into overflow, and if we have some elements left over, we'll get it to
Mm.
you."
Mm.
And everyone in the room should hopefully raise their hand and say, "No,
That's not right.
that's
Yeah.
not right."
Yeah.
And that would be incredibly,
Yeah.
in my opinion, unworthy.
Yeah.
The question that I got in terms of that was the next verse.
Mhm.
Um,
Examine yourself. Yeah.
yeah, talking about examining, and then for this reason, many among you are weak and sick, and a
Mhm.
number sleep. This idea of death, and so like what happens if we do this in an
Mhm.
unworthy manner? And the reality is that there are physical consequences to sin.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know not every sin leads to that, and not every cancer or diagnosis is because of a specific sin,
Yeah.
but we have to understand that there are consequences. The death, burial, and
Absolutely.
resurrection of Jesus Christ took care of the ultimate consequence, but the temporal consequences are still a real thing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, sickness and weakness and
Mhm.
death are,
Yeah.
according to Paul, here are some
Yeah.
things that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. James talks about that too. I mean, into James 5, we often think about people coming to the elders for prayer.
Mm,
And part of it is right in that context, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another so
yeah,
that you may be healed,
yeah,
like physically healed. And so, yeah, sickness, those kinds of death, there are consequences for
absolutely.
sin. And I appreciate that you said that. I think sometimes we shy away from that.
Yeah.
Um, that doesn't mean we go looking under a rock every time something
Oh,
bad happens to us and like, what
yeah,
did I do wrong? Right.
yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
but that's good. So, yeah. And so I think, um, in the modern day church, um, you know, it is probably helpful to think through, pray through
Mm,
what we're about to do, to be introspective as we're doing it, and to not just go through it glibly or just
mm,
let it unaffected by it.
yeah.
It's like in a you mentioned a story of like just going down like. I have to leave early. I'm going to grab the elements to just take
Pop
off.
it.
I mean, that
Yeah,
might popcorn communion or
yeah,
whatever,
yeah, yeah.
and that might not be taken in a worthy manner. I don't know, but
Sure,
it's
sure. Yeah,
I think what was happening in the context of 1 Corinthians 11 is pretty specific,
yeah,
and yeah, so good. Thanks for engaging on that.
yeah.
Uh, Other question that has come in is can what about non-Christians,
Mm.
people who aren't believers, who haven't embraced Jesus, who haven't placed their faith in Him for eternal life? What do you think about that? Can they take communion? Let's say an unbeliever comes on a Sunday morning, we're taking communion together.
Yeah.
Um, what say you? Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if I have the
yeah,
the authoritative last word. I'll just give you my thoughts. I think, again, to the degree that you see something in the elements is to the degree you're going to protect the table. And
sure,
so, if this is just bread and juice that is done to remind us and for us to remember the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, then someone who is not a believer may not be able to fully appreciate and remember.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it doesn't negate the fact that it they can, because
sure,
nothing is happening in there.
hmm,
So, for example, as a kid, I took a trip to Washington D.C. and I remember going to the tomb of the unknown soldier.
hmm,
And at that point, I had no real understanding of what those men and
hmm,
women that monument represents. And every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, they change the guard. And I, I wish I could go back now and fully appreciate it. But my standing there as a fifth grader,
you didn't feel the weight of it.
I
Yeah,
didn't feel the weight. I was glad I was there,
yeah,
and looking back, I can appreciate that I stood there at that spot. But if I went back now, I would
hmm,
I would view that moment differently.
yeah,
And I think there are people who would come to the table and take the elements and probably be like me as a
hmm,
fifth grader at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and see it and participate and like, wow,
hmm,
okay, this is neat, and not fully understand it, but nothing bad is going to happen
sure,
to the church or to that person. I also think because this is so similar to the Passover meal, we know that
mhm,
foreigners, and that's the word that is used in Exodus, are able to take the meal
mm,
as well, not fully appreciating
sure,
that what was happening with
yeah,
being a nationality, a racial group of people who were enslaved in Egypt, and they're not that race, but they can participate in it
mhm,
clearly tells me that there's some openness to it. But if the elements have some sort of presence of Jesus, something, then at that point, we've got to ask ourselves, well, man, if you're not a member of the church, if you haven't declared your faith in Christ, then man, this isn't for you. But then that gets into a whole host of things, like what do you do with the leftovers? What
Sure.
if some falls on the ground and a mouse eats it?
Right.
And I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
No.
Those are just theological
Yeah.
questions that have to arise from that.
If it becomes the body and blood of Jesus
Yeah.
in that moment. Yeah.
House rule for us, we typically, I look at my kiddos and just say, hey, I think baptism and communion go together. And so a house rule for us is, man, when you profess your faith and trust in Christ and you declare that in baptism, then to me, that it makes a ton of sense for you to begin to take the bread and juice. And that's just something that for me is just like, man, when that's a public declaration for you, then man, jump in and publicly do this with us.
You've gone public with your faith. Let's do that.
But man, that's just a Russell rule, not
That's great. Yeah, and I mean, even here, our language over the years has been on a Sunday morning. Hey, this is. I mean, like you said, early practice. We see believers taking the bread and the cup, and so we say, hey, this is a celebration for believers in Christ to remember. And if that's not you this morning, feel free to stay seated, or when you walk by the elements, because a lot of times people move toward the element, go by the table, and they take the bread and the juice, and we say, hey, just pass by. I mean, we're not going to single people out. No. We're not going to make them cross their arms when they go by it, or point them out, or ask, hey, do you have your ID on you that says you're a card carrying Christian? It's
their participation doesn't invalidate it.
Exactly.
And their participation doesn't give them any grace. It just is, it would be participation without fully understanding.
Absolutely.
And being able to truly remember and give thanks.
Yeah, that's a good word. I like that. Well, man, thanks. This is helpful. It's helpful for me just to talk about it. It solidifies things for me. And so appreciate your teaching on this and digging a little deeper. And hope it's helpful for you all. I hope that by peeling back some of these layers of things we've added to communion, that we're able to enjoy it more and participate in it in a more special way. Like I hope it increases the depth in which we remember and celebrate. Sure. And doesn't decrease.
And I would say, if you have any questions as a result, I mean, we're just scratching the surface, and we'd love to try to answer them, or at least just entertain those questions and have the dialogue. So if you've got some, don't hesitate to fire them off. We're going to be talking about baptism, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions there as well. So
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks, Jamey. It's fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on our next Epilogue podcast.